The air shimmered above the cracked, ochre plains of Xylos Prime, a desolate world scarred by constant sandstorms and the heavier hand of cosmic injustice. Here, beneath a bruised purple sky, a lone human figure stood vigil, a stark silhouette against the backdrop of an alien encampment. This wasn't a place of grand battles or heroic last stands, but rather a forgotten corner of the galaxy where suffering was institutionalized, and hope, a rare and fragile commodity. He was Kale, a name once synonymous with the elite human interstellar marines, now merely a peacekeeper, or so the official records claimed, on this godforsaken frontier outpost. Disillusionment clung to him like the dust to his weathered uniform, a constant reminder of promises broken and ideals eroded. Yet, beneath the cynical facade, a deeply ingrained moral compass still spun true, sometimes painfully so. The weight of a past operation, a failure he rarely spoke of, pressed down on him daily, etching lines of regret deeper into his stern face. His gaze, usually distant, was fixed on a small, huddled figure amidst the harsh, angular structures of the Forlag compound. This was Lyra, a Xylosian, her species known for their delicate, almost ethereal forms, now cruelly bent under the yoke of slavery. Her movements were slow, her head bowed, her vibrant, multifaceted eyes, which Kale had only glimpsed from afar, likely dulled by years of relentless oppression. The Xylosians, a beautiful and gentle people, had been conquered and enslaved by the Forlag, a dominant, aggressive race whose very presence reeked of cruelty and entitlement. They thrived on subjugation, on exerting their brutal will over those weaker than themselves. Lyra's spirit, Kale observed, appeared dim, a flickering ember, yet he sensed, deep within his own weary soul, that it was not entirely extinguished. A spark remained, however, buried under layers of fear and despair. Suddenly, the harsh tranquility of the camp was shattered. A group of burly Forlag overseers, their obsidian-scaled bodies glinting in the dying light, descended upon Lyra. Their guttural shouts echoed across the barren landscape as they began to beat her, publicly, brutally, with blunted staves. Each sickening thud resonated not just through the dry air, but through Kale's very bones. He watched, his jaw tight, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The raw indignation, a feeling he thought he had long since suppressed, simmered to a furious boil within him. His military training screamed at him to stay out of it, to observe the protocols, to recognize the futility of interfering with Forlag internal affairs on their own controlled territory. But the sight of such casual cruelty, directed at such a defenseless being, gnawed at the last vestiges of his self-restraint. The past failure, the one he carried like a shroud, whispered temptations of inaction, but a stronger, more primal urge, rooted in an unyielding sense of right and wrong, rose to meet it. This was not just another skirmish. This was systematic, dehumanizing violence, and Kale, despite everything, found he could not simply stand by. The decision, though instantaneous, felt as old as time itself, a primal urge to protect the innocent. Before a logical thought could fully form, before the consequences could weigh him down, Kale started to move. He would intervene. This act of defiance, this lone human standing against an empire, was only the beginning. For more epic tales of human heroism and sacrifice, subscribe to the channel and join our community of truth seekers and story lovers. He moved with a quiet, determined intensity, each step eating up the dusty ground between him and the unfolding brutality. The Forlag, engrossed in their savage display, didn't notice him until he was almost upon them, a silent, implacable force in their midst. His uniform, usually a symbol of detached authority, now seemed to transform into a banner of defiance. He didn't speak, didn't shout a warning. Instead, he simply stepped directly into the fray, placing his own body squarely between Lyra and her tormentors. The thud of the blunted staff, intended for the Xylosian's fragile form, instead connected with Kale's armored shoulder with a sickening crack that reverberated through the desolate landscape. The Forlag paused, momentarily stunned by this audacious, unthinkable intervention. Who was this human, this supposed peacekeeper, to disrupt their sanctioned punishment? Their surprise quickly morphed into a furious, guttural rage. Kale braced himself, his jaw set, his eyes locked on Lyra's terrified, wide gaze. He offered no resistance, no counterattack, simply enduring the hail of blows that now rained down upon him. The staves, once used to inflict pain upon the Xylosian, were now redirected with escalating ferocity towards the human who dared to intercede. Each strike was a testament to the forelag's unbridled fury, a harsh declaration of their dominance. He felt the sharp impact on his ribs, the searing pain across his back as another blow landed. His vision swam, a kaleidoscope of red and black, but he refused to fall, refused to yield that vital space between Lyra and her oppressors. He was a shield, a living barrier, absorbing every brutal impact, his body screaming in protest with each successive blow. He would not fight back, for to do so would only escalate the violence, and likely condemn Lyra further. His purpose was singular: to endure, to protect. Lyra, huddled on the ground, witnessed this extraordinary act of sacrifice with a mixture of terror and profound bewilderment. Her small, delicate hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the raw, visceral shock of seeing someone, a human no less, willingly take such a beating for her. The pain that had been her constant companion, the ever-present threat of violence, was, for this fleeting moment, deflected, absorbed by another. She saw the grim determination on Cale's face, the unwavering resolve in his eyes, even as his body visibly faltered under the relentless assault. A spark, long dormant within her, flickered to life. It was a spark of hope, a fragile, nascent belief that perhaps, just perhaps, not all beings were consumed by cruelty. This human, this stranger, was showing her a selflessness she had believed extinct, a bravery that transcended fear. The image of him, taking the beating, not fighting back, purely enduring for her sake, seared itself into her memory, a powerful, indelible mark on her spirit. The forelag eventually ceased their assault, leaving Cale sprawled on the ground, a broken heap of uniform and flesh. His breathing was shallow, ragged, and a dark stain spread across the back of his uniform. The overseers, their rage momentarily sated, grunted their satisfaction, then roughly grabbed Lyra. They dragged her away, their victory over the human's insolence complete, their hold on her servitude reaffirmed. But as Lyra was pulled away, her eyes, now shining with an emotion more complex than fear, met Cale's. In that silent, profound exchange, a silent vow was made, a seed of gratitude planted, destined to grow into something far greater than either of them could have possibly imagined in that desolate moment. She was whisked off to an unknown fate, carrying with her not just the bruises of her captivity, but the haunting, inspiring image of Cale's sacrifice. The aftermath for Cale was swift and unforgiving. Instead of commendation for intervening, his actions were deemed a gross violation of protocol, an unacceptable interference in forelag internal affairs that threatened the fragile diplomatic truce. Peacekeeper regulations, strictly enforced to maintain order in the volatile frontier sectors, offered no leeway for individual conscience when it clashed with strategic appeasement. Within days, Cale found himself facing a tribunal, his superior officer, Commander Rylos, a man of rigid adherence to rules, presiding with an air of disappointed formality. Cale, still bruised and stiff, his body aching from the severe beating, listened impassively as the charges were read: insubordination, dereliction of duty, and endangering interspecies relations. There was no mention of the unarmed alien he had protected, no acknowledgement of the brutality he had witnessed. The system, designed to maintain peace at any cost, was now punishing the very act of compassion. The verdict was predictable: demotion, pending a full review that almost certainly meant discharge from the peacekeepers. Rylos, his face etched with official regret, offered platitudes about the greater good and the necessity of maintaining order. Cale merely nodded, his gaze distant, already turning inward. He grappled with the consequences, the stark reality of his impending dismissal from the only life he had ever known, yet he felt no regret, not truly. The pain, both physical and existential, was a heavy cloak, but underneath, a quiet resolve burned. He questioned the very foundation of the system he had served, a system that allowed such casual cruelty to persist under the guise of non-intervention. Was peace truly peace if it was built on the suffering of the innocent? His moral compass, once a guiding star, now spun wildly, rejecting the compromise and complicity that defined his former role. Meanwhile, Lyra's fate, seemingly sealed, took another turn. The incident with the human peacekeeper, while an unexpected reprieve from immediate death, had marked her. The four-lag overseers, fearing further complications or unwanted attention, swiftly decided to sell her off-world. She was traded to a new master, a reclusive merchant on a distant, resource-rich planet known for its harsh mining operations. Her journey was long and arduous, packed into a crowded cargo hold with other unfortunate souls, but through it all, the memory of Cale's sacrifice remained a vivid, burning ember in her mind. It was a secret flame, carefully nurtured amidst the desolate prospects of continued servitude. She carried it not as a burden, but as a beacon, a stark contrast to the darkness that surrounded her. The image of his stoic endurance, his willingness to suffer for a stranger, became her silent mantra, a whispered promise of a different, better existence. The impact of Cale's intervention, though initially seen as an isolated incident, rippled far beyond the immediate confines of the four-lag encampment. Whispers began to circulate among the enslaved Xylosians. Tales were exchanged in hushed tones during forced labor shifts, in the shadowed corners of barracks, and through clandestine communication networks. A human, a former Marine, had stepped between a four-lag overseer and a Xylosian slave, taking the beating intended for her. This was unprecedented. It was a story of defiance, of selfless courage from an unexpected quarter. These whispers, initially faint and fearful, began to gain momentum, sparking a nascent discontent, a questioning of the absolute authority the four-lag had always wielded. It was a tiny crack in the edifice of oppression, but a crack nonetheless. The Xylosians, long accustomed to their subjugated status, found themselves stirring with a collective, almost subconscious, awakening. The notion that an outsider, especially a powerful human, would risk everything. For one of them, ignited a dangerous idea, that their suffering was not inevitable, that resistance might be possible. The incident with Cale became a legend in the making, a foundational myth whispered from elder to child, from slave to slave. It wasn't just about Lyra, it was about the possibility of dignity, of inherent worth recognized by a stranger. This sentiment, fragile as it was, began to coalesce into a shared yearning for freedom, a faint but growing rumble of defiance beneath the surface of their enforced silence. The four-lag, oblivious in their arrogance, continued their brutal practices, unaware that one act of kindness had planted the first seeds of a revolution that would one day challenge their empire to its very core. Cale, recovering from his injuries, had unknowingly ignited a fire that would one day consume the galaxy. Years slipped by, a relentless river carving new landscapes in the lives of Cale and Lyra, pushing them further apart yet inextricably linked by that singular, transformative moment. For Cale, the discharge came as expected, a formal severance from the military life he had known. Stripped of his uniform and rank, he became a wanderer, a ghost drifting through the fringe sectors of humanity's vast, indifferent empire. He took on odd jobs, transport runs, security details on forgotten outposts, always seeking a new horizon, always searching for a way to make a difference, however small. Yet, an ingrained cynicism grew, a bitter fruit of his idealism. He intervened when he saw injustice, rescuing stranded colonists, defending isolated settlements from pirate raids, but each victory felt hollow, a temporary salve on a festering wound. The universe, it seemed, was too vast, too cruel, for one man to truly change. He was a solitary figure, his acts of heroism largely unnoticed, his spirit gradually succumbing to a profound sense of isolation. The memory of Lyra, the Xylosian girl he had protected, became a distant echo, a wistful reminder of a battle he had fought, whose ultimate outcome remained unknown. He carried the scars, both physical and emotional, but the hope that had once fueled him began to wane, leaving him with an aching void. Meanwhile, on a distant planet, Lyra's life unfolded in a parallel, yet vastly different, narrative of endurance and quiet transformation. Her new master, the reclusive merchant, proved to be less overtly cruel than the four-lag, but his operations were brutal in their demands. She toiled in alien mines, extracting precious minerals from the planet's crust, her delicate Xylosian hands hardened by ceaseless labor. The physical hardship was immense, yet the internal fire ignited by Kale's sacrifice never dimmed. It was her secret strength, a wellspring of resilience. She observed, she listened, she learned. The merchant's varied clientele, an eclectic mix of species from across the galaxy, provided her with an education far beyond the confines of her initial enslavement. She absorbed languages, studied trade routes, understood the subtle power dynamics that governed interstellar commerce. The quiet, observant slave began to develop an unexpected cunning, a sharp intellect honed by necessity, and a burning desire for freedom. The memory of the human who had shielded her became a personal legend, a constant reminder that selflessness existed, and gave her hope. She adapted, growing stronger not just in body, but in mind and spirit, patiently biding her time. As Kale wandered and Lyra endured, the galactic stage continued to shift under the iron fist of the Four-Lag Imperium. Unchecked by the impotent human peacekeepers and other cautious empires, their dominion expanded relentlessly. World after world fell under their shadow, their resources plundered, their populations enslaved, their cultures extinguished. The Four-Lag, fueled by their insatiable hunger for power and control, became an even more formidable and terrifying force. Their fleets patrolled the cosmos, their garrisons ensured compliance, and their propaganda machine broadcast an unceasing message of their inevitable, rightful rule. The cries of the oppressed were drowned out by the roar of their warships, and the hope for liberation seemed to recede further with each passing cycle. Their brutality, once confined to distant outposts, now cast a long, dark shadow across entire sectors, and their grip on the Xylosian homeworlds tightened even further, crushing any visible dissent. Yet, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, the Four-Lag's unchecked expansion began to sow the seeds of its own destruction. Among the scattered, enslaved Xylosian enclaves, whispers, once merely of survival, now began to coalesce into something more defiant. Driven by the memory of centuries of oppression and, perhaps, the potent legend of a human selfless act, a new kind of rumor began to circulate. It spoke of a charismatic figure emerging from the shadows, a leader who advocated not just survival, but active resistance. This leader, still anonymous, spoke with a voice that resonated with the deep-seated yearning for freedom that had been simmering beneath the surface of Xylosian consciousness for too long. Tales of this nascent movement, of a bold new vision for a free Xylosian people, spread through clandestine networks, carried by trade ships and refugee vessels, igniting a flicker of hope in countless hearts. Kale found himself adrift, physically and spiritually, on a derelict cargo freighter limping through the Outer Rim. His latest job, safeguarding a shipment of illicit stimulants, had gone predictably south, leaving him stranded with only credits enough for passage to the next forgotten dust ball. The vastness of space, once a canvas for adventure, now felt like an endless, echoing tomb for his waning idealism. Each sun he passed seemed to mock his efforts, its indifferent light illuminating a universe that rewarded cruelty and crushed hope with a relentless, mechanical efficiency. He'd seen too much, fought too many losing battles, watched too many good intentions dissolve into the harsh reality of galactic politics. The memory of the Xylosian girl, Lyra, had faded into a blurred image, another poignant regret in a long line of them. He often wondered if his intervention had even mattered, if she was still alive, or if she had simply vanished into the abyss of Four-Lag's servitude like so many others. His own purpose, once so clear, had become a dull, distant ache, and the thought of continuing the fight felt increasingly futile. Despair, a silent and insidious enemy, threatened to consume him entirely. Yet, even in the depths of his personal gloom, a faint signal managed to pierce the static of his resignation. On a crackling comms channel, buried beneath layers of garbled market reports and pirate warnings, fragmented news began to filter through. Whispers, then murmurs, then definite reports of widespread unrest, not isolated skirmishes, but a growing, organized rebellion erupting across several outer systems. The reports were vague, often contradictory, but a consistent detail emerged: This wasn't just random acts of defiance. There was a method, a coordinated effort, and a compelling leadership behind it. The term, resistance movement, was used with increasing frequency, and notably, it centered on the very species Kale had once desperately tried to protect. The Xylosians. A long dormant spark, a flicker of his old purpose, stirred within him, faint but undeniably present. Indeed, far from the desolate freighter and Kale's fading hope, Lyra had not merely survived, she had flourished, transformed by hardship and fueled by the fire Kale had inadvertently lit within her. Now older, her multifaceted eyes held the weight of experience and the fierce intelligence of a seasoned leader. She had escaped the mines years ago, using the skills and knowledge she had subtly acquired, and had become a pivotal figure in the burgeoning resistance. The legend of the human who took a beating for a defenseless Xylosian slave was not just a historical anecdote for her, it was the sacred origin story of their movement. She had woven Kale's selfless act into the very fabric of their ideology, transforming it into a powerful foundational tale that resonated deeply with her people. "He saw our worth when we could not," she would declare to hushed gatherings in hidden enclaves, her voice ringing with conviction. "He chose compassion when the galaxy chose cruelty. His sacrifice proved we are not just slaves, we are beings worthy of protection, worthy of freedom." This narrative, imbued with the potent symbolism of human courage, galvanized the Xylosian people. They had been taught their worthlessness for generations, but Kale's act, amplified and given purpose by Lyra's powerful rhetoric, offered a counter-narrative, a reason to believe in themselves again. Under Lyra's shrewd guidance, the resistance began to achieve minor but profoundly symbolic victories against the Forlag oppressors. A Forlag supply depot, supposedly impregnable, suffered a daring raid, its stores redistributed to starving Xylosian populations. A small, but strategically important, Forlag patrol was ambushed and routed, its equipment captured and repurposed. These weren't grand battles, but they were significant. Each victory, however small, chipped away at the myth of Forlag invincibility, bolstering Xylosian morale and attracting more disillusioned individuals to their cause. The momentum was building, a snowball effect of hope and defiance. Word of the Queen of Hearts, as some whispered Lyra had become, spread like wildfire among the enslaved populations, igniting the flames of rebellion across subjugated worlds. The Forlag, in their arrogant complacency, dismissed these early uprisings as mere banditry, isolated acts of desperation, utterly failing to comprehend the true nature of the force that was now stirring beneath their iron heel. They were blind to the quiet, determined ascent of a queen born of suffering and sacrifice. The fragmented news, the whispers of a Xylosian resistance, began to coalesce into something Kale could no longer ignore, igniting a flicker of his old purpose that stubbornly refused to be extinguished. It was more than just reports, it was a resonance, a deep, almost instinctual pull towards a justice that seemed attainable, however distant. The universe, which had felt so indifferently cruel, suddenly presented a crack, a possibility, a new trajectory for his battered idealism. He felt a familiar stir, a rekindling of the desire to stand between the helpless and their oppressors, a sensation he hadn't fully embraced since that singular, defining moment years ago. This wasn't just any rebellion, it was their rebellion, the Xylosians. He felt an undeniable urge to investigate, to understand if this burgeoning movement truly embodied the hope he desperately sought to find again. His path, long winding and fraught with disillusionment, now seemed to converge on this distant, defiant star. His journey led him through treacherous space lanes and shadowy backchannels, utilizing old contacts and hidden routes. He eventually made contact with peripheral members of the Xylosian underground on a bustling, multi-species trading hub. These were not the hardened warriors of the front lines, but the quiet network of sympathizers, information brokers, and logistical strategists. His human origin, a mark of the dominant species in most galactic affairs, was initially met with deep suspicion. Generations of oppression had taught them to trust no outsider, especially one from a race that, while not directly responsible for their enslavement, had largely stood by in silence. Kale, however, possessed a quiet persistence, a stark sincerity that slowly began to chip away at their ingrained distrust. He didn't demand respect, he earned it through patient observation, through small, deliberate acts of assistance, and through an unwavering commitment to their cause that transcended species lines. He offered his knowledge of four-lag military tactics, his insights into galactic politics, and his unwavering belief in their struggle. Meanwhile, Lyra, the former slave girl, had undergone a profound metamorphosis. No longer merely a figure of hope, she had consolidated her leadership, transforming into a formidable icon of defiance for her people. Her every action, every impassioned speech, every strategic decision, radiated a quiet yet unyielding authority. She had become not just a leader, but a symbol. The Empress, some called her, while others whispered, Queen Lyra, the Liberator. Her compassion was legendary, her strategic mind razor-sharp, honed by years of silent suffering and astute observation. She walked among her people not as a detached general, but as one of them, bearing the scars of their shared past, yet pointing resolutely towards a brighter future. She understood that their strength lay not just in arms, but in unity, in the belief that they were worthy of freedom. Her vision was clear, not just liberation, but the establishment of a just and equitable society for all Xylosians. Under Lyra's visionary leadership, the Xylosian resistance was no longer merely a collection of desperate, sporadic acts of defiance. It had evolved, growing exponentially in both membership and sophistication. What began as scattered cells indulging in minor sabotage had transitioned into an organized rebellion, a cohesive military force capable of challenging four-lag garrisons head-on. Their tactics were innovative, utilizing the Xylosians' natural agility and their intimate knowledge of their home systems to outmaneuver the larger, more ponderous four-lag war machine. They struck with precision, then faded back into the labyrinthine asteroid fields or the dense, bioluminescent jungles of their liberated outposts. Each successful engagement, each liberated Xylosian enclave, further fueled the flames of rebellion, drawing more converts to their cause and cementing Lyra's position as the undisputed heart and mind of their burgeoning revolution. The sleeping giant had awoken, and its cry for freedom echoed across the stars, growing louder with every passing day. Kale, through patient demonstration and an unwavering commitment that resonated deeply with the Xylosian spirit, slowly began to dismantle the walls of distrust. His military expertise, garnered from years as a marine and peacekeeper, proved invaluable. He started with basic drills, showing them efficient ways to move under fire, how to establish defensible positions, and the critical importance of secure communication. He didn't lecture, he taught by example, often putting himself in harm's way during simulated exercises to prove a point. The Xylosian fighters, quick to learn and fiercely dedicated, absorbed his lessons with a hunger born of generations of oppression. He helped them analyze four-lag patrol routes, decipher their command structures, and exploit the inherent arrogance that permeated their enemies' tactics. He designed more effective ambush strategies for their indigenous terrains and optimized their limited resources, turning every scrap of salvage into a potential weapon. His calm demeanor under pressure, his tactical insights, and his quiet dedication slowly but surely earned him the respect of the resistance fighters. They began to see him not as an outsider, but as a crucial ally, a human who understood their struggle and was willing to bleed for their freedom. He was no longer just the human, he was Kale, a valued member of their shared fight. From her command center, a repurposed four-lag communications nexus hidden deep within a liberated moon, Lyra formally declared her vision for a free Xylosian nation. Her voice, broadcast across encrypted channels to every enslaved world, was clear, resonant, and filled with an unshakable conviction. She spoke of unity, not just among Xylosians, but among all sentient beings yearning for self-determination. She articulated a future where their vibrant culture would flourish once more, where the scars of slavery would heal, and where peace would be built not on submission, but on mutual respect. She invoked the memory of all who had suffered, all who had dreamed, and all who had dared to resist, weaving their individual struggles into a grand tapestry of communal resilience. Her words were a balm to weary souls and a clarion call to action, inspiring millions across the star systems still under the four-lag heel. She pledged to lead them to a new dawn, a future forged in courage and unwavering hope. She was no longer just a leader, she was a beacon, a living embodiment of their deepest aspirations. The four-lag Imperium, finally forced to acknowledge the growing threat, responded with characteristic brutality. The decentralized, sporadic uprisings had now coalesced into a full-scale rebellion, and the Imperium could no longer dismiss it as mere banditry. They viewed Lyra's declaration as an intolerable affront, a direct challenge to their absolute authority. Intelligence reports, initially scoffed at, now painted a stark picture of a well-organized, rapidly expanding resistance. The Imperial High Command, enraged by the audacity of a subjugated species, launched a massive counteroffensive. Fleets of warships were redirected, vast armies of ground troops mobilized, and elite four-lag shock units were deployed with a single, brutal directive: crush the rebellion, swiftly and mercilessly. They intended to make an example of the Xylosians, to remind the galaxy of the terrible price of defiance. The Xylosian resistance, despite their newfound organization and morale, faced overwhelming odds. The sheer might of the four-lag Imperium, their technological superiority, and their vast numbers presented a daunting challenge. Their nascent navy was dwarfed by the Imperial fleets, their ground forces often outgunned and outmaneuvered. Casualties mounted, and their liberated territories came under intense attack. Supply lines were stretched thin, and resources dwindled. The initial euphoria of their early victories began to give way to a grim determination. They understood that this was not merely a battle, it was an existential struggle for the very survival of their species and their dream of freedom. The situation grew increasingly desperate, forcing Lyra and her war council to consider daring, high-risk strategies. Conventional warfare against such an overwhelming force was a path to certain annihilation. They needed something audacious, something unexpected, something that could turn the tide against an empire confident in its own invincibility. The time for caution was over. Only desperate measures, executed with precision and courage, could offer them a chance. The desperate stakes demanded desperate solutions, and it was Kale who, with a quiet confidence that belied his weariness, proposed a plan so audacious it initially drew stares of stunned disbelief from the Xylosian War Council. His strategy wasn't about meeting the four-lag head-on in a pitched battle they were destined to lose. It was about leveraging their indigenous strengths against the invaders' arrogance. He meticulously outlined a multi-pronged assault, one that utilized the Xylosians' intimate knowledge of the treacherous, labyrinthine asteroid fields and the dense, bioluminescent jungles of their core worlds. These were environments the lumbering four-lag warships and ground vehicles struggled to navigate. The plan focused on a series of rapid, coordinated strikes against critical, yet poorly defended, four-lag supply convoys and communication hubs, stretching the Imperium's already strained logistics. This would force the four-lag to disperse their overwhelming forces, making them vulnerable to smaller, more agile Xylosian units. Crucially, Kale's plan emphasized precision strikes designed to sow chaos and doubt within the four-lag command structure, rather than attempting to hold territory they couldn't defend. It was a strategy born of guerrilla warfare, a testament to fighting smart when you couldn't fight bigger. Lyra presided over the War Council, her slender form radiating an almost regal authority despite the flickering holographic projections of strategic maps that illuminated the tension in the room. Around her, the most trusted Xylosian generals and advisors debated Kale's plan with a mixture of apprehension and a reluctant acknowledgement of its sheer ingenuity. Lyra watched Kale intently, her multifaceted eyes tracing the lines of his aged, yet resolute face as he calmly articulated each phase of the operation, responding to every skeptical query with reasoned logic and detailed calculations. He spoke not with bravado, but with the quiet conviction of a seasoned warrior who understood the true cost of battle. There was a peculiar steadiness in his gaze, an unwavering integrity that Lyra found profoundly familiar. It was a quality she hadn't encountered in years, not since. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the tactical implications of his presentation. Yet, a subconscious current, a faint whisper of a long-buried memory, stirred within her. As Kale continued to elaborate on the intricate timing of the diversionary attacks and the calculated risks involved in each phase, Lyra felt that familiar glimmer intensify. It wasn't just his strategic brilliance, though that was undeniable. It was something in his posture, the way his shoulders would subtly tense before relaxing, the deeply etched lines around his eyes that spoke of past burdens carried with silent strength. It was the unwavering commitment to a cause that wasn't inherently his, a selfless dedication that echoed a moment from her earliest, darkest memories. She couldn't quite place it, couldn't pull the fragmented pieces together, but a profound sense of recognition, of an integrity she had once desperately clung to as a symbol of hope, resonated deep within her. It was a powerful, almost spiritual connection to something she had believed irrevocably lost to the brutal passage of time and the harsh realities of her world. Despite the inherent risks, the desperate need for a game-changer weighed heavily on the Council. Kale's plan, though daring, offered a credible path to a decisive victory, even against such overwhelming odds. Its reliance on Xylosian's strengths, their adaptability, their knowledge of their environment, and their numerical superiority in localized skirmishes, made it uniquely suited to their capabilities. After hours of intense deliberation, punctuated by Lyra's insightful questions and Kale's unflappable responses, a consensus was finally reached. With a solemn nod, Lyra gave the order. The plan, now officially sanctioned, was adopted as their best and perhaps only chance to break the Forlag Imperium's iron grip. Preparations began immediately, a whirlwind of activity as the Xylosian resistance geared up for what would undoubtedly be the largest and most pivotal confrontation of their nascent rebellion. The fate of an entire species, the future of their freedom, now rested on the shoulders of this audacious strategy, conceived by a human whose name, for now, remained just Kale. The vast, inky blackness of space above Xylos Prime erupted into a maelstrom of light and fury. Thousands of Xylosian fighters, sleek and agile, surged forward, a living tide against the lumbering, heavily armed Forlag battle cruisers. This was it, the largest battle of the rebellion, the culmination of countless sacrifices and years of desperate struggle. Kale, at the helm of a heavily modified Xylosian assault ship, led a crucial diversionary attack. His vessel, flanked by a squadron of daring Xylosian pilots, streaked past the main Forlag lines, drawing fire and attention away from Lyra's primary assault forces. His movements were precise, calculated, a dance of destruction performed with grim efficiency, each maneuver a testament to his years of experience in interstellar combat. He barked orders into the comms, his voice a steadying presence amidst the chaos, guiding his wingmen through barrages of energy fire and swarms of incoming Forlag interceptors. The fate of their entire resistance now hinged on the success of this desperate gamble. Back on the flagship, nestled deep within a cloaked asteroid, Lyra stood before a massive holographic display, her multifaceted eyes tracking every shifting variable of the unfolding battle. She was a picture of serene command, a queen leading her people into their ultimate trial. Her slender fingers moved with practiced grace across the command console, rerouting power, issuing tactical commands, anticipating Forlag counter-moves with uncanny foresight. She had spent years preparing for this moment, not just learning the art of war, but understanding the hearts of her people and the brutal logic of their enemy. Every Xylosian pilot, every ground troop, every stratagem was a piece of a grand, desperate puzzle, and Lyra, their queen, was assembling it with unshakable resolve. She didn't just direct, she inspired, her calm focus radiating through the comms, bolstering the courage of her fighters even as the space around them burned. The weight of her people's future rested heavily on her shoulders, yet she bore it with an almost divine grace, a testament to her profound transformation from slave to sovereign. The battle raged, a brutal symphony of explosions and energy discharges that echoed across the void. Both sides paid a terrible price for every inch of contested space. Xylosian ships, far outmatched in raw firepower, relied on speed and cunning, weaving through the Forlag formations like elusive spirits. But even their agility couldn't prevent heavy losses. Flares of dying Xylosian vessels periodically lit up the darkness, each a heartbreaking testament to the cost of freedom. On the Forlag's side, their superior numbers and heavy armor meant they absorbed unimaginable punishment, yet their ships, too, began to buckle under the relentless, coordinated assault. Their shields flickered, their weapons discharged with less regularity, and their command structure, stretched thin by Cale's diversion, showed signs of strain. The sheer ferocity of the Xylosian resistance was something the arrogant Forlag had never anticipated, never truly believed possible. The outcome of this colossal engagement hung precariously in the balance, a razor's edge from which either triumph or utter annihilation could fall. Deep within the chaos of the diversionary attack, Cale's strategic brilliance shone like a supernova. His ship, battered and scarred, executed a daring maneuver, drawing a significant number of Forlag capital ships into a trap laid amidst a dense asteroid field. He had predicted their pursuit, their insatiable desire to crush any perceived insolence. As the Forlag vessels lumbered into position, previously cloaked Xylosian minefields detonated, turning the asteroid field into a deadly gauntlet. Cale, fighting intensely, continued to inspire his Xylosian comrades through sheer force of will and an unwavering display of valor. He personally disabled the Forlag gunship, his aim surgically precise despite the shaking of his own vessel. His calm voice cut through the comms, encouraging his pilots, reminding them of their training, and more importantly, reminding them of what they were fighting for. He wasn't just a pilot, he was a warrior, a leader, a symbol of unyielding courage. The Xylosians fighting alongside him, witnessing his selfless actions and tactical genius firsthand, felt their resolve harden, their determination to win this impossible battle redouble. They fought not just for freedom, but for their newfound hero, the human who had once taken a beating for one of their own, and who now led them into the heart of the enemy's fury. A blinding flash of energy erupted from a Forlag battleship, a direct hit to Cale's already battered vessel. Alarms blared, red lights pulsed, and the control panel sparked violently. Cale grunted, wrestling with the unresponsive controls as the ship spun wildly. His left arm hung uselessly, a sharp pain shooting up to his shoulder, and a gash above his eye bled freely, obscuring his vision. His unit, caught in the crossfire of the unfolding chaos, was now cornered, their ships crippled or destroyed, trapped between a relentless Forlag assault and an impassable asteroid field. This was it, the end of the line. With a grimace, Cale activated the ship's last remaining defensive measure, a short-range EMP burst, sacrificing his vessel to buy his remaining wingmen a precious few seconds. He then did the only thing he could. He aimed his ship, one last time, directly at the heart of the nearest Forlag cruiser, a final, desperate act of defiance. On the Xylosian command channels, the frantic reports of his unit's dire situation reached Lyra's advisors. "Cale's unit is lost! They are making a final stand!" One voice cried out, tinged with despair. Another added, almost as an afterthought, "He's acting just like the legend, the human protector, sacrificing himself." The words, "human protector," cut through the cacophony of battle reports and tactical analyses like a laser. Lyra, who had been orchestrating the wider offensive with cold, strategic precision, froze. A jolt, electric and immediate, shot through her. It wasn't just the words. It was the vivid imagery they conjured, a human silhouette, taking a beating, a shield against cruelty. That familiar sense of connection, the faint memory that had tugged at her during the War Council, now roared into full focus. It couldn't be. Could it? The possibility, however remote, was enough. A single, selfless act, remembered for decades, had unexpectedly re-entered her present. Her strategic mind instantly calculated the risks, the immense cost of diverting forces from the main thrust. But this was more than tactics. This was an echo of her very past, a debt owed she hadn't realized still existed. "Divert Sector Gamma's reserve fleet," Lyra commanded, her voice cutting through the shocked silence of her advisors. "Punch through to Cale's coordinates. Immediately." Her advisors protested, citing the critical importance of that fleet for the primary assault, the immense risk, the potential for catastrophic failure. But Lyra's resolve was unshakable. "He bought us time once," she stated, her multifaceted eyes burning with a fierce, almost primal light. "Now we return the favor." It was a daring, high-risk decision, a gamble that could unravel their entire offensive, but her conviction was absolute. The legend of the human who saved her was too strong to ignore, the pull too profound to deny. She would not let him fall alone. Minutes later, which felt like an eternity amidst the storm of battle, Lyra's reserve fleet, a wave of Xylosian fighters, burst through the four-lag blockade, their energy cannons blazing. Lyra herself was at the forefront, in a command fighter, leading the charge. The sight that greeted her was harrowing. Kale's ship, its hull breached and smoking, was locked in a desperate, suicidal charge against a four-lag cruiser, its shields flickering under concentrated fire. Around him, the remnants of his unit fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, but their defeat was imminent. Lyra's gaze locked onto Kale's battered ship, then, as her fighter swooped past, her eyes met his through the shattered cockpit canopy. Time seemed to slow, the thunder of battle a distant hum. His face, streaked with blood and soot, his one good eye gleaming with defiant courage, held a faint, almost ghost-like familiarity. There was recognition there, a deep, resonant echo from a distant past, but it was still veiled by time, by the grime of battle, by the sheer, improbable odds of this reunion. He was a hero, a legend in the making, but the personal connection, the profound identity of the man who had taken a beating for her, remained tantalizingly just out of reach. Yet that fleeting glance, that shared moment of desperate, improbable connection, ignited something powerful within Lyra. The arrival of Lyra's forces was perfectly timed, a surge of fresh fighters and firepower that slammed into the four-lag flank with devastating effect. The initial shock and awe of their appearance, combined with the Xylosians' overwhelming numerical superiority in that sector, utterly destabilized the four-lag assault. Their tight formations fractured, their disciplined lines crumbled under the sudden, unexpected onslaught. Laser fire ripped through four-lag hulls, missiles found their targets, and the tide of the battle, which had moments before seemed irrevocably lost, began to turn with a sudden, dramatic shift. Hope, a fragile thing in war, surged through the Xylosian ranks, reinvigorating their weary fighters. The four-lag, caught completely off guard, their command structure unable to adapt to Lyra's audacious gamble, found themselves suddenly on the defensive, their momentum shattered. The Xylosians roared, pressing their newfound advantage, and the space around Kale's cornered unit, moments ago a death trap, now became a launching pad for a desperate, yet triumphant counterattack. The arrival of Lyra's forces was perfectly timed, a surge of fresh fighters and firepower that slammed into the four-lag flank with devastating effect. The initial shock and awe of their appearance, combined with the Xylosians' overwhelming numerical superiority in that sector, utterly destabilized the four-lag assault. Their tight formations fractured, their disciplined lines crumbled under the sudden, unexpected onslaught. Laser fire ripped through four-lag hulls, missiles found their targets, and the tide of the battle, which had moments before seemed irrevocably lost, began to turn with a sudden, dramatic shift. Hope, a fragile thing in war, surged through the Xylosian ranks, reinvigorating their weary fighters. The four-lag, caught completely off guard, their command structure unable to adapt to Lyra's audacious gamble, found themselves suddenly on the defensive, their momentum shattered. The Xylosians roared, pressing their newfound advantage, and the space around Kale's cornered unit, moments ago a death trap, now became a launching pad for a desperate, yet triumphant counterattack. The four-lag, disoriented and outmaneuvered, fell back in disarray, their retreat morphing into a full-blown rout as Xylosian fighters harried their escape. The strategic stronghold, a key four-lag staging ground that had been the primary objective of this massive offensive, was secured. Cheers erupted across Xylosian channels, mixing with the triumphant peal of ancient Xylosian battle horns, signaling a victory that resonated far beyond the shattered hulls and smoking debris. It was a monumental win, not just in tactical terms, but in spirit. They had faced the full might of the Imperium and pushed it back. A tangible shift in power had occurred, a crack in the seemingly impenetrable facade of four-lag dominance. The news spread like wildfire through the resistance, inspiring renewed vigor and belief. The Xylosians had tasted true victory, a bittersweet, hard-won triumph forged in the crucible of their own courage and Kale's desperate heroism. Their morale, once flickering, now blazed, igniting a fervent hope for a future free of oppression. Amidst the jubilant celebrations and the chaotic aftermath of battle, the Xylosian medical teams worked tirelessly, tending to the wounded. Kale, his ship a smoking wreck, his body battered and bruised, was carefully extracted from the wreckage. Two Xylosian paramedics, their faces grim, gently maneuvered his unconscious form onto a stretcher. His left arm was undoubtedly broken, his ribs likely fractured, and a deep gash above his brow continued to seep blood. He was a testament to the brutal ferocity of the fighting, a testament to the sheer will that had allowed him to endure. He was brought to a makeshift medical tent, set up quickly in the ruins of a four-lag command post, now repurposed for the liberators. He was just one of many, a quiet, suffering figure amidst the joyous shouts and relieved sighs of his Xylosian comrades. Exhaustion, both physical and mental, had finally claimed him, pulling him into a deep, dreamless sleep. Lyra, after ensuring the immediate consolidation of their gains and issuing orders for pursuit and clean-up, moved through the crowded medical bay, personally checking on her wounded. She moved with a regal grace, offering words of comfort and encouragement, her presence alone a balm to the suffering. The air hummed with the soft whir of diagnostic tools and the low murmurs of convalescing warriors. As she approached a secluded cot at the far end of the tent, her steps slowed. A human, his face pale and drawn, lay still, an oxygen mask covering his nose and mouth. His chest rose and fell with a shallow, rhythmic breath. She recognized the outline, the strong jawline, the stubborn set of his brow. Her gaze fell to a distinctive scar, a jagged line above his left eyebrow, partially obscured by a bandage, but still visible. It was a relic, a faint yet unmistakable mark, a brutal memento of a beating taken decades ago. A powerful, almost forgotten memory, a visceral flash of pain and then astonishing, selfless courage surged through Lyra. It was the memory of a human, a Marine, shielding her small, fragile body from the vicious blows of a four-lag overseer. The very same scar, a testament to his sacrifice, glimmered faintly beneath the makeshift bandage. Time had blurred the details, but the indelible imprint of that moment, the raw emotion of it, had remained etched upon her soul. The protector. Her protector. The legend of the human who had taken a beating for an enslaved Xylosian girl. It wasn't just a story she had used to inspire her people. It was real, it was alive, and he was lying right before her. A gasp, soft and involuntary, escaped her lips. A powerful, almost forgotten memory, a visceral flash of pain and then astonishing, selfless courage surged through Lyra. It was the memory of a human, a Marine, shielding her small, fragile body from the vicious blows of a four-lag overseer. The very same scar, a testament to his sacrifice, glimmered faintly beneath the makeshift bandage. Time had blurred the details, but the indelible imprint of that moment, the raw emotion of it, had remained etched upon her soul. The protector. Her protector. The legend of the human who had taken a beating for an enslaved Xylosian girl. It wasn't just a story she had used to inspire her people. It was real, it was alive, and he was lying right before her. A gasp, soft and involuntary, escaped her lips, the sound caught in her throat. Her multifaceted eyes, usually so composed, widened with a sudden, overwhelming rush of recognition. The face, worn and aged by years of struggle, was undeniably his. Kale. The name, whispered internally, felt like a sacred incantation. The boy she had last seen cowering on the dusty ground, taking blows meant for her, was now this man, a warrior who had fearlessly led her people in battle, risking everything once again. An electric current of gratitude, awe, and a profound, wordless tenderness coursed through her being. It was an emotional revelation of monumental proportions, a reconnection with the very genesis of her purpose, the spark that had ignited her transformation. Her hand trembled as she reached out, tracing the faint outline of the scar, her touch feather-light, almost reverent. Kale stirred, his eyes fluttering open, struggling to focus on the ethereal vision hovering above him. Lyra. But not the terrified, small figure he remembered. This Lyra was regal, powerful, her presence radiating an authority that spoke of command and unwavering resolve. Her eyes, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher, held his gaze. "Lyra!" he rasped, his voice hoarse, disbelief clouding his pain-addled mind. It can't be." A sad, gentle smile touched her lips, a smile that held centuries of suffering and newly found triumph. "It is, Cale. It is I, Lyra. The one you saved, all those years ago." Her voice, rich and melodic, was laced with an emotion that brought tears to his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. The impossible, the truly miraculous, had just occurred. The small, terrified slave girl had returned, not as a victim, but as a queen, a liberator. The shared past, that singular, brutal moment of connection, hung in the air between them, thick with unshed emotions. I don't understand," Cale murmured, his mind struggling to piece together the fragments of memory and reality. "How you became this." His gaze swept over her, the ornate robes, the aura of leadership, the strength that radiated from her. Lyra took his hand, her touch cool and reassuring. "You gave me hope, Cale. You showed me that humanity, true humanity, existed even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Your single act of kindness, your willingness to absorb their cruelty, it became my light. It became the foundation of everything, the legend that fueled our resistance." She squeezed his hand gently. "Every time I faltered, every time despair threatened to consume me, I remembered your face, your courage, that scar." They spoke for a long time, the clamor of the victorious celebration outside providing a muted backdrop to their quiet, poignant reunion. Cale, still weak, listened as Lyra recounted her journey, how his sacrifice had been woven into the very fabric of the Xylosian resistance, a whispered legend that had grown into a rallying cry. He learned how his quiet act of defiance had been amplified, becoming a symbol of hope and the genesis of a revolution. He spoke of his own wandering years, his disillusionment, his renewed purpose when he heard whispers of the Xylosian struggle. Later, with Cale resting more comfortably, Lyra gathered her inner circle, the generals and advisors who had witnessed the incredible battle. Her face was solemn, yet radiant with a deep, profound belief. "We have spoken of the legend," she began, her voice resonating through the small command tent. "The human who took a beating for a slave, whose selfless act sparked the fire of our freedom. Today, that legend is confirmed. He is here. He is Cale." Her gesture towards the medical cot was filled with reverence. "He is our protector, our ally, and the living embodiment of the courage we found within ourselves." The room buzzed with astonished murmurs, the weight of her words, the truth of their shared history, settling upon them like a sacred trust. The gravity of Lyra's words settled over her inner circle, a profound silence enveloping the tent. Their queen, their liberator, had just revealed that the foundational myth of their entire resistance, the tale of selfless human courage that had galvanized their spirit for decades, was not just a story, but a living truth. The man who lay wounded on the medical cot, the one whose tactical brilliance had just secured their monumental victory, was that human. The revelation rippled through them, a wave of stunned awe and then, a surging tide of reverent understanding. The legend was real. A few days later, with Cale sufficiently recovered to be moved, a grand ceremony was held in the newly liberated capital, a sprawling city that still bore the scars of four-lag occupation but now vibrated with the joy of freedom. Thousands of Xylosians, their faces radiant with hope, gathered in the central plaza, awaiting their queen. When Lyra appeared, radiant in traditional Xylosian ceremonial robes, a hush fell over the throng. She stood before them, her voice amplified by sonic projectors, and spoke of their hard-won victory, of the long journey to freedom, and then she spoke of Cale. "My people, we stand here today, free, because of countless acts of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering belief," Lyra declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "But there is one among us, a being of another species, whose single act of kindness, decades ago, planted the seed of defiance in my own heart, and ultimately ignited the flame of our revolution. She turned, her hand extending towards Cale, who stood beside her, his arms still in a sling, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the spotlight. I introduce to you Cale, the human whose selfless courage inspired me, and through me, inspired us all. He is the living symbol of hope, the proof that compassion transcends all boundaries. A roar erupted from the crowd, a wave of adoration and gratitude washing over Cale. He felt a blush creep up his neck, unaccustomed to such overwhelming praise, especially from an entire civilization. He was a warrior, a protector, not a figurehead. As the cheers slowly subsided, Cale stepped forward, compelled by Lyra's gentle nudge. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the sea of multifaceted eyes fixed upon him. My queen, my friends, he began, his voice gravelly but sincere. I am humbled by your words and by your gratitude. He paused, then continued, his gaze unwavering. But the credit, the true heroism, belongs to you, the Zylosian people. You took a forgotten act of kindness and forged it into a revolution. You endured, you fought, and you won your own freedom. I merely played a very small part. He gestured to the assembled Zylosian leaders. It is your resilience, your unity, and your unwavering belief in yourselves that truly deserve this celebration. His humility, far from diminishing him, only deepened the crowd's respect and admiration. Later, in a more private setting, Lyra, now seated on a newly crafted throne, her posture radiating quiet authority, looked at Cale with an earnest intensity. Cale, she began, her tone formal yet deeply personal. You are more than a symbol to us. You are a strategic mind, a seasoned warrior, and a man of unwavering moral compass. Our world is free, but it is fragile. We need to rebuild, to grow stronger, to ensure that the Forlag can never again threaten our sovereignty. She leaned forward slightly, her request carrying the weight of her people's future. I offer you a permanent and honored position within the newly forming Zylosian government. I propose an alliance, not just between us, but between our peoples. An alliance rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and the promise of a future forged by cooperation. Her offer was clear, unambiguous, and profoundly meaningful. It was an invitation to help build a new era, to bridge the divide between species, and to enshrine the very values he had always fought for. The Zylosian people, having witnessed Cale's humility and his undeniable contribution to their victory, embraced him not just as a hero of legend, but as a trusted ally. The idea of an alliance with humanity, a species that had long been a distant, often aloof presence in galactic affairs, now seemed not only possible but desirable. The future, though still uncertain, shimmered with the promise of a new dawn. A new era of interspecies cooperation, forged in the fires of shared suffering and redeemed by selfless courage, seemed poised to begin. Cale, standing amidst the clamor of a liberated world, felt the weight of Lyra's offer settling upon him. It wasn't just a position. It was a profound invitation to sculpt the future of an entire civilization, a chance to finally build the just society he had yearned for, that elusive dream that had driven him through years of cynicism and despair. He looked out at the faces of the Zylosian people, their eyes shining with a hope he had helped rekindle. The nomadic, solitary existence he had known for so long now seemed insufficient, barren even. After days of quiet reflection, walking through the bustling, newly awakened streets, observing the resilience and spirit of a people reborn, Cale made his decision. He would accept. This wasn't merely a job, it was purpose, a chance to ensure that no other species would suffer the indignity of oppression, a chance to atone for the failures of his past, and to fully embrace the future Lyra envisioned. He would help build this new world, not just as a protector, but as an architect of peace. With Cale at her side, Lyra, now formally recognized as queen, embarked on the arduous process of restructuring and rebuilding their shattered world. The Zylosian people, though victorious, faced monumental challenges. Decades of Forlag occupation had decimated their infrastructure, plundered their resources, and suppressed their cultural identity. Cale, leveraging his extensive military and logistical expertise, quickly became indispensable. He spearheaded the demilitarization efforts, transforming the resistance fighters into a disciplined, defensive force. He advised on resource allocation, helping to prioritize the restoration of essential services, food production, medical facilities, and sustainable energy grids. He worked closely with Zylosian engineers to repurpose salvaged four-lag technology for civilian use, turning weapons of war into tools of reconstruction. His calm, methodical approach and practical solutions earned him the respect of the Zylosian Council, who, despite their initial reservations about a human's involvement, now largely deferred to his strategic insights. He helped establish fair trade protocols, ensuring that the nascent Zylosian economy would be built on equitable principles, a stark contrast to the exploitative practices of their former oppressors. However, the galaxy was not yet at peace. The Four-Lag Imperium, reeling from their humiliating defeat, was far from broken. Their arrogance, wounded pride, and insatiable desire for conquest meant they would not simply fade into the cosmic dust. Intelligence reports, meticulously gathered by the newly formed Zylosian security network, painted a grim picture. The Four-Lag were not retreating, they were regrouping. Enraged by the temerity of a subjugated species and the unexpected intervention of a human, the Imperial High Command was preparing for a final, desperate assault. This wouldn't be a mere counteroffensive, it would be an all-out, genocidal strike, designed not just to reclaim lost territory, but to utterly annihilate the Zylosian people and extinguish any lingering embers of rebellion. Their message to the rest of the galaxy would be brutal and unambiguous. Defiance would not be tolerated. The threat of the Four-Lag Empire loomed large, a terrifying storm brewing on the horizon. The Zylosians, having just savored the sweet taste of freedom, now understood the true cost of maintaining it. They and their human allies, the small contingent of former peacekeepers and wanderers Kale had brought into the fold, had to prepare to defend their newfound sovereignty against an overwhelming imperial might determined to erase them from existence. The reconstruction efforts, vital as they were, had to proceed hand in hand with an accelerated defense program. Shipyards that had once built civilian transports now churned out interceptors. Scientists who had been focused on ecological restoration now diverted their genius to defense systems. The euphoria of victory quickly gave way to a grim, resolute determination. The Four-Lag were coming, and this time, the Zylosians, under Queen Lyra's visionary leadership and with Kale's unwavering guidance, would meet them not as slaves, but as a free people, ready to fight for their very survival. The threat of the Four-Lag Empire loomed large, a terrifying storm brewing on the horizon. The Zylosians, having just savored the sweet taste of freedom, now understood the true cost of maintaining it. They and their human allies, the small contingent of former peacekeepers and wanderers Kale had brought into the fold, had to prepare to defend their newfound sovereignty against an overwhelming imperial might determined to erase them from existence. The reconstruction efforts, vital as they were, had to proceed hand in hand with an accelerated defense program. Shipyards that had once built civilian transports now churned out interceptors. Scientists who had been focused on ecological restoration now diverted their genius to defense systems. The euphoria of victory quickly gave way to a grim, resolute determination. The Four-Lag were coming, and this time, the Zylosians, under Queen Lyra's visionary leadership and with Kale's unwavering guidance, would meet them not as slaves, but as a free people, ready to fight for their very survival. Queen Lyra, her presence radiating a calm, unyielding strength, stood on the newly constructed command bridge overlooking the bustling orbital shipyards, where Zylosian vessels, now emblazoned with the symbol of their free nation, prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Beside her, Kale, his arm now fully healed, directed the placement of defensive platforms and coordinated fleet movements. He was not merely a tactical advisor, he was a pillar of strategic wisdom, his voice carrying the authority of countless battles fought and won. The Zylosian defenses, once rudimentary, had been meticulously fortified under Kale's discerning eye, integrating their innate knowledge of local anomalies and spatial currents with advanced human defense protocols. They were no longer just survivors, they were a formidable force, transformed from a desperate rebellion into a unified, resolute nation ready to face the full might of their ancient oppressors. A new era had begun, not of passive resistance, but of active, determined defense. The Forlag, in their arrogance, anticipated an easy victory, underestimating the profound transformation that had occurred within the Zylosian spirit. They did not factor in a united people, fighting for their very existence, guided by a queen who remembered every lash and every act of selfless courage. They certainly did not account for the human presence, the tactical brilliance Kale brought to their defense. Their final, desperate assault, when it came, was met with a ferocity and cunning they had never encountered. The Zylosian fleets, augmented by the small but crucial human contingent, executed Kale's meticulously crafted battle plan with precision, turning the familiar terrain of their home system into a deadly labyrinth for the invading Forlag armada. Plasma cannons roared, energy shields shimmered, and the combined forces of freedom fought with unmatched valor. The battle was long and brutal, but in the end, it was the Forlag who broke, their imperial might shattered against the unyielding will of a free people. The victory was absolute, a triumph that echoed across the galaxy, forever altering the balance of power. The Forlag Imperium, once a terrifying symbol of oppression, was dealt a crippling blow, its dominion irrevocably fractured. For the Zylosian people, it marked not just the end of a war, but the dawn of a new civilization. The future of the Zylosian human alliance, forged in the crucible of shared sacrifice and mutual respect, now stood as a beacon of hope in a galaxy too often consumed by conflict. It was a testament to what could be achieved when species set aside differences and united against tyranny, a model for a future built on cooperation rather than subjugation. Diplomatic overtures poured in from other systems, eager to establish relations with the newly liberated Zylosians and their powerful human allies. The seeds of a new galactic order had been sown, one promising peace and prosperity for all. Lyra, now truly queen of her people, watched the last remnants of the Forlag fleet retreat into the void, her heart swelling with an emotion too vast for words. Kale stood beside her, his gaze steady, his presence a comforting anchor in the momentous aftermath. She turned to him, a profound, tender smile gracing her lips. "We did it, Kale," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We truly did it." He returned her smile, a rare, genuine expression of peace and contentment. "You did it, Queen Lyra," he corrected gently. "You inspired a revolution. I merely helped you arm it." She shook her head, her hand finding his. "No, Kale. It began with you. That single act of kindness, that moment of selfless courage, it reshaped my life, and through that, it reshaped an entire civilization." Her eyes, luminous with gratitude and affection, met his. "From slave and protector to allies and leaders. Who would have thought?" Kale's hand tightened on hers, a silent acknowledgement of their incredible journey, a bond forged in pain and hope. The universe, vast and unpredictable, had brought them together, two souls from vastly different worlds, their destinies intertwined by a simple act of human compassion that had bloomed into the liberation of an entire species. Their story would be told for generations, a legend not of conquest, but of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of empathy. The sounds of celebration filled the air, a symphony of freedom ringing throughout the cosmos. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories of heroism and sacrifice, and check out our next video for another thrilling adventure.